That's it, everybody. Episode 39, season 4, episode 10. The episode was called With Eyes Open. That was your Succession series finale, and it's officially over. And that completes the story of Succession and the Roys. So let's get off the footnotes. Plus, we have Ryan Page here. What's going on, Ryan?
How's it going, Matt? Happy to be back. Long time no see. As we were just covering this not that long ago before when we had all sorts of crazy cousin Greg centric ideas.
And I mentioned to you at the end of the day, no matter what we think or what we do, it's all up to Jesse Armstrong and his writing crew. And this is what they decided for the end of Succession. The person who ultimately becomes the CEO of Waystar is Tom, Shiv's, I guess, estranged husband, but we've seen that they're definitely going to stay together, and we'll explain why. For the 3 Roy kids, they do not become the succession after all. Kendall, the front runner, was just 1 vote away from becoming the CEO of Waystar, and it came down to his sister Shiv, and his sister Shiv is the one that voted against him becoming CEO. They are sold to Madsen and his company Gojo, and they are the ones who ultimately take over Succession, or they are the ones that ultimately take over Waystar. Roman is definitely distraught, but he seems like he's going to be okay with Jerry's martini. Cousin Greg stays with Tom, but we see he's going to be a pack mule, and he is going to pretty much be a pledge. But I guess that's better than being fired, but we'll explain that. Who else am I missing? Connor is going to just be rich in a quote unquote long distance relationship.
Well, maybe they leave that ambiguous. We'll talk about that. That was one of my least favorite parts of the episode.
True. I do have a note for that.
That one scene was simultaneously my favorite and least favorite part of the episode. But we'll get into that scene because it was a very important scene and it was Connor's only scene.
Yeah, right.
So yeah.
So pretty much, yeah. I marked all the boxes. Anyone else I'm forgetting? Missing, obviously, Logan's dead.
Yeah, Logan's dead. Jerry, Carl, Frank, they don't get into. It sounds like Jerry's staying. Carl and Frank are not. If the little like vignette that not vignette, but the little kind of combo he has off to the aside with Greg is anything to go off of. Sounds like Jerry's the only one staying of that like core group. Also, Hugo's probably gone. He was Team Kendall. Carolina might be staying. They don't really mention her. But yeah, it seems I would say of the staff members, Hugo and Carolina, even their side characters, I would say the 3 main executives that we follow the entire time are Carl, Frank, and Jerry. It sounds like Carl and Frank, despite supporting the sale, are out.
Well, that's what they get. All right. So that pretty much ties up all the loose knots. I think it was a great finale from the start. I think it was a very, very good one. And historically speaking, I think it'll be known as one of the best because it successfully ended everybody's story in the correct, most realistic way, and it was also justified. And so let me ask the big question off the bat, Ryan. Do you think this was the right finale?
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if there was a right finale. We talked like ourselves as like possibilities, just kind of for fun. And I think what we came up with is pretty good too. But I think this was great. It was kind of like a mix of several of those. I mean, again, I don't know if right necessarily dictates anything here. I think that this was a very narratively pleasing finale for the tone and tempo that they told. The name of the episode, I think I didn't know that when we did our last one. I had looked up the name of the episode. I think that really gave us a hard look at how this was going to end. Actually,
and it's called With Open Arms.
Open eyes.
Oh, sorry, With Open Eyes.
And I think that we see all 3 of the Roy. I mean, I know there's 4 Roys, but the 3 Roys that we kind of follow, they all see it. Their eyes are open. Kendall, when he loses everything, realizes he says it at the end in his that big scene that we get with it's just the three kids arguing in the conference room. Uh, he says, "I'm a cog made for this machine." He openly admits that he is not worth anything anywhere else. That it is I'm in charge. I work here or I don't.
Yeah, and he said, I
He
might
said that.
die. It might die at the end, which would have
Yeah.
completed your prediction.
Yeah, but and Roman even said that after Shiv left, we're all bullshit. He said that. He said, "I'm bullshit. She's bullshit." He
Yeah.
says, "We're not real people." He
Hmm.
essentially goes, "We're make believe. We're not real people. We've been filled up and built up by this system that we've lived in. These ivory towers, and we're not real. Like
Yeah,
there's a
we're
real world."
spoiled brats. We are
Yeah,
an example of being nepo babies, which over the past
essentially.
few years has really taken a influence on people. Like everybody always blames. Not, I'm sorry. Let me word this differently. Nepotism is definitely a crux to a lot of people in this world, especially now in a world where inflation is big. It's hard to go by day. It's hard to survive day to day, and you see
People
somebody
want
who's
to
a nepo
blame.
baby to
Yeah,
get through.
people want to have someone to talk about. They want to have someone to point at and say that person didn't earn it, and yet they have it. It's
Yeah,
sometimes it's worthy, sometimes it's not, but it's a mechanism people use
and in
to
this
say.
story, it's somewhat assuring that the nepo babies did not get it at the end of the day. Well, unofficially, because we know about Shiv
Well,
fate.
also I was actually going to say, even Shiv, we talk about with open eyes. Uh, I mean, we saw Shiv in the beginning. She was queen bee, girl boss. I mean, people fell in love with the character because of it, despite all of her very obvious flaws. That she was just as bad as her brothers, just as bad as her dad. People forgave a lot of that at first, because she was a little bit, more to the left, a little bit more palatable. She was the palatable face of the Roys. I mean, they even say it. They use her in that capacity as she's the softer, more acceptable Roy that we can put out in front of people who don't like our, Newsmax QAnon nonsense that we put on TV. But even then, she's still bullshit, just like Roman, just like Kendall. And at the end, she makes the decision could be any number of reasons, which is why I really like that it was her that ended up making the decision, which I did not see coming. Um, she makes the decision to vote because she knows Tom's going to get it. Makes the
Yeah, she
decision to
told him
vote.
this a few seasons right before.
Yeah, and so she, open eyes. She at the very end, she puts her hand in his hand, kind of meekly as they both get. She says congratulations with absolutely no emotion. To which Tom responds, "Thank you," with equal amounts of emotion. And
Mhm.
she, he puts his hand out first, and she just gently places her hand in. She's open eyes. She's the wife. A lot of people she technically she's
Yeah,
not
that
women.
that's
She's
what
the
she
wife.
accepted. She
She
accepted.
accepted the role of Marcia and of her mother, these roles that she swore she'd never take, these roles that she was so, she railed against those types of women throughout the entire series. She hated Marcia. She hates her mother. And at the end, with open eyes, knowing she knowingly did that. She knowingly voted for Tom to take it, knowingly went with him, knowingly took that role because she realized that at that moment, that was it. That was her life. Her life had been, I don't want to say reduced, because there are a lot of very happy mothers and wives who are just mothers and wives, and that's a hard enough job as it is. But
Mhm.
we saw that she had ambition beyond that. So this is not a case of Shiv wanted to be a mother and a wife the whole time. She wanted to be the CEO, but she resigned herself to this role. It was the role that her father basically wanted her to play. I know a lot of people say that maybe he really wanted to be Shiv. I don't think he wanted to be any of
He
his
did
kids. I
tell a
think,
lot of. He told all his
yeah,
siblings
he
that,
told
and they all
all of them
mentioned
at
that
some point. Yeah,
in their final argument with each other.
yeah, and I think that he didn't, frankly, probably care for any of them to be in charge. To be totally honest with you, I don't think he had a preference. I think that
Yeah.
when he died, he didn't really care what happened.
Hmm.
Genuinely, I believe that, which is almost the worst part about it because the Roys imploded over something that their father probably didn't care about selling. I mean, he was the one who started the sale, right? So, um, again, I think that with open eyes, all three of the Roys saw themselves for who they are, and I think resigned to it. Again, Ken does nothing; he sits there in nothingness. Uh, Roman, he had his brief stint as the badass, CEO, and then he moved on. He's back to being the playboy at the bar, right? He's or whatever. He's he's out. He's out. He's got his drink, and he's resigned to the fact that he's going to be heating up a bar stool, probably using all of that
Notice he
money
was
he
the
just
last
made.
one to actually smile in the final
He
shots.
did, and he did smile, and I think that's why, because ultimately he ended up, I think, sort of where he started, which smarter, wiser. I don't think
Yeah.
he's the same person. He's definitely a different person, but in terms of his situation, he was always the long shot. He was always like, and I used to always choose to school for cool, right? As they say, that the saying goes. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Too
and
cool
so
for
he,
school.
well, yeah, sometimes reverse is
Oh,
a
oh,
joke on it, yeah. And
oh.
so,
It's always
yeah,
learning something.
yeah, and so he, I think he ended up again kind of back where he started, just having grown, and I think he smiled because the whole, I forget how long the entire series takes. I know that this is over the course of a very limited time, but the series takes over the course of a few years, I believe.
It's 2 years, I believe, from
Um,
start to finish.
and he had basically this crazy like 2 year experience where he got to be in charge, or relatively speaking, in charge of one of the biggest companies in the country, in the world, and then he got to leave, which is feels very Roman, feels very wayward, feels very nomadic. And he had this experience, and he was this close, even though he was on the outside when it started. He was this close. He was in the conversation. Had
Yeah.
Logan, yeah, had Logan not died, he may have gotten it because he was the only one talking to Logan at the end. Like
Quick
so,
question to
yeah.
that. Do you think he ultimately wanted it? His brother said you don't really want it. And do you
I
think he
don't.
knows he doesn't want that deep down
Yeah, I
too?
think that yes, deep down, I think obviously I think you want it for all of the reasons everybody wants it, but it's different than I would say Shiv. I would say Shiv is also different. It's different the way Kendall wanted it. When I talk, I think Kendall wanted it, and not. I mean, he said it outright. This is my life.
Yeah.
Kendall wanted it. Roman and Shiv wanted it
He
partly
was
because Kendall wanted it, honestly, partly because it felt like the thing to do. It felt again like the way to get their father's approval finally was to take over. But I don't know that Roman necessarily wanted it. At least not at the very end. After he broke down in episode 9, I think he realized that this is tough. I think he wanted out, and he's the one who broached that subject with the family. Like, what if we just sell? What if we don't fight over this? Let's sell it and get out and not worry about what Matson does, what anybody does. And I think at the end, even at the end, he voted for Kendall. And then they have
at
the
first a hesitant vote, but then he was just like, "Yeah, we do. I do want it. I do want it."
yeah. And so he said, F it. He voted for Kendall. And Kendall had been trying to like bribe him, like you get socials, you get the, and that I don't think any
He'd
of
be
that
the head
mattered.
of social media.
Yeah, he just
Here's your prize.
I don't think any of that mattered. I think he was just like
He was being
whatever.
such a dick in that last
Yeah,
scene.
Ken wants it. Let's give it to Ken. And then, but when Shiv said no, when they got to that room, they ended up talking about the waiter that Kendall
Killed.
killed.
Yeah, she did bring that up. But one thing I should have brought up at the I thought of this after we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Will his involvement in the murder? Well, if it was his involvement of the waiter dying at the end of season 1, will that be brought up? And she said it, and she did mention
Yeah.
at the end, and I guess it's also the question: did Shiv was she truly going to stick to her voting pact that her and her brother made in the middle of this finale? Did she stick to it until she found out Tom was going to be the CEO if the deal was blocked?
Well, first I'll say I don't think it did get mentioned. I don't believe, genuinely don't believe that's why Shiv said no. I don't believe she was like remembered. Ken, you killed someone. You can't be CEO. I know she said those words, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I mean, she got up and she left way before then. She was hesitant way before then. But
Right.
when Kendall lies about it,
Yeah, he's
Kendall
just like,
says,
no,
"I
no,
didn't
no,
do it.
I
I
didn't
didn't
do it.
do that."
And he says like, and then that's what's great about that scene. It turned to the most simple, childish behavior
Yeah.
things. Like they're literally being delusional. They're arguing like they're 8 years old. He literally, Kendall says, "I'm the oldest," and she literally says, "You're
No,
literally
you're
not the
not.
oldest."
Yes, but when he lies about, and I think both of them knew it was a lie. I know they asked a couple times, like, "Are you like you're saying you made it up?" Like, I don't believe anyone believed that he made it up.
Mhm.
But I think when they realized he was going to sit there and lie to them for their vote, lie to them to be CEO, that's when Roman said, "No, man." And I think
Yeah,
if Roman could have, he would have taken his vote back right there, because I think that was when Roman realized he wanted out. And that's why I think Roman is the least sad. He's still sad, I think, but the least sad.
He was the only one to
when
sign those
it
paper
goes.
over.
Well, someone had to sign it. And he was one of the CEOs, and Kendall wasn't going to do it. So, which is also interesting because, doing the dad stuff, right? Roman couldn't do it, and Kendall had to step in. And then suddenly Kendall couldn't do it. Kendall couldn't do his obligation. He couldn't do his duty.
Yeah, he goes to
And
the elevator after finding out.
he dips, and so
This-
Roman goes in, and Roman has to step in one last time as the last sort of CEO standing to sign away the company. Roman is the one who signs away the company. Kendall couldn't do it, even though the vote went through and all that. So I think that's an interesting, very like a last minute sort of reflection on Roman took a lot of crap for not being able to go through with it, with his father, not being able to do the speech and do all of that. And then again, when they needed to do something, essentially their father's last wishes, if you really think about it, Roman is the one who did it, not Kendall.
right.
Because Kendall really wasn't there. We found that out. Kendall wasn't there for Logan. He wasn't trying to be CEO to succeed for his father. He didn't care about, care about Logan and that it's his father. He didn't care about Logan's legacy. He cared about his. Not that Roman cared much more, but Roman has always been the one who was most closely aligned with Logan. And so I thought it was interesting that it was, Roman who ultimately gave Mattson control, which was technically what Logan had wanted the whole time.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's definitely an interesting subplot of that ending as well. And again, they all grew in their own ways, but also they all, again, grew is the wrong word. They all resigned, which I think is interesting. They all resigned to their lot in life at the end, and those lots look very different. But they all resigned, which I thought was a very good ending. It was a unique ending in that, again, there was no big flashy death or whatever, but we'll get it. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about, so we don't want to talk just
for
about
sure. Talking about I want to hit on Shiv a little more.
Sure.
Now, whether this is a narrative on the internet or what, but after Shiv makes her decision, people asked this question: is Shiv the real villain of the show all along? And did she do the right thing for what she did? Tell me your thoughts, Ryan, on that statement.
No, Shiv is not the villain. It is Tom, I guess, if you're looking at if you're looking at it from like a binary structure of villain hero, which is hard to do given the character personalities.
For sure. And especially in this fourth season, because thinking about it, Logan was the quote unquote villain the whole time. And then once he left, and once he left, there was that central who that was, that compass to play that antagonizing role. I guess Mattson a little bit, and looking back, he someone play that role, but I guess it's open to interpretation.
So Shakespeare, again, which I believe is highly influential to this, King Lear, but Shakespeare more broadly, because it's a tragedy, a classic tragedy in that sense. A lot of times when you get to Shakespeare, both King Lear, Macbeth, another one, they have a foreign invader. A lot of times the final act involves an outside force pushing the people we'd seen in the first two acts into their final positions, whatever that, obviously in Shakespeare, a lot of times they just die, but there's a lot of times there's a foreign invader, some sort of foreign force. Like I said, in Macbeth, it's Macduff and the rebel army that's taking over. In King Lear, it's Lear's estranged daughter with the King of France, I believe. So there's always like this foreign force. And so I thought it was very interesting, by the way, that, Mattson, at first I was like, oh, Mattson is Swedish because they didn't want to do the direct Elon Musk comparison. That was genuinely what I thought. I was like, they want him to be foreign. They want him to be eccentric because he's, again, clearly based on Elon Musk. But I think a lot of the reason that he's European and not, South African or something else was because of the Shakespeare angle of, an invading kingdom coming into their kingdom. But the foreign invader tapped with a traitor from Logan's camp. That's the main villain of this series, of this season, I should say. again, very classic Shakespeare. And in the earlier acts, earlier seasons, yeah, it was the king. It was our main character, was the overarching villain, and his machinations and the people moving against him. That was that. That's the first few acts of this, and then the final act, we take all of the characters and we move them to their final positions as the foreign invader comes and brings the end of the world, essentially, figuratively. So I do think this season, I guess the main villain is Tom, but there's a show. I mean, everyone knows this show, House of Cards, the Netflix one, but I'm not actually talking about the Netflix one. There is obviously it's based on a book and based on a British TV show, House of Cards. And I've watched I've never read the books, but I've watched the British one, and they're very different. The British one feels very different. The British one feels a lot like this, I will say. The very end, where Tom basically gets coronated, essentially, like it was very House of Cards UK, which I personally enjoyed. There's like the pomp, the circumstance, but also the banality of it. Like Tom walked into a room, shook some hands, and fired two people. That's what happened when he walked into the room. He said Carl and Frank are gone. Jerry's staying. Greg is staying. And again, he did it with like so calmly. So it just was very interesting. And the end of the House of Cards UK, I won't get into spoilers for that, although it's very old, so I could. Feels the same way. There's like this weird sort of like you're elevating, right, to this high point, but it feels just so rudimentary. And I really like the way that,
one.
right, but also you're just a guy. Like I really liked the way that it went forward. I really liked the feel of the ending for Tom. And again, I think Tom did, or the actor Matthew McFadden did really well, despite frankly this season being cut way back. And I mentioned that in the last the preview. Like I feel like they gave him so much less to do, and I think now we know why.
And he hit it in all the scenes he was in, and
but they didn't want to play it too hard, right? If they made him the central point of this entire season, people would have guessed it. And I don't think people. I mean, some people said it, right, because it was obviously an option. But I don't think a lot of people were guessing that it would be Tom. I think a lot of people guessed like what I guessed, that it wouldn't be any of them. And they even mentioned at the beginning, they mentioned the Walter guy, which is who I said might do it.
Yeah, right.
I was like, oh crap, am I completely right? Is it going to be Walter and Madsen taking over? So like,
and I was 10 minutes late when you texted me that. That was what you were referring to. That's what
when
I was
they
upset. I didn't start
specifically mentioned the Walter guy. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I predicted him specifically, like as one of the outside, people we didn't pay any attention to who could take it. They didn't go that way, but I think that they hit Tom relatively well for, again, being that he was in the family, being that he had experience. Like you had to consider.
And we saw a little bit of the turns and after the third season, and when he admitted that he's not happy in this relationship, and
him and Shiv,
and you at that point in the series, you really felt for Tom because she was a terrible partner to him. And this is actually a good point to talk about what I guess was the interview for Madsen to pick Tom. And despite Tom now being CEO, one of the reasons why he might not be happy is that Madsen knows that I now can treat you like a puppet. And she which was Shiv literally said to Lucas, the episode before, I am your puppet, and now her husband's the puppet. And then there's that big thing he said, you know what? He pretty much said, I want to fuck your wife.
Yeah.
And he didn't resist whatsoever. He's like, okay, whatever you want, just make it to be me. And now Lucas is his boss, has that over him. And how he might not truly be happy because he has that over him this whole time. And he said, she'll probably want to fuck me too. And this is part of that broken corporate stage marriage. And I'm sure narratively they'll stay together for like 10 years and then
forever.
Then they'll divorce or whatever. But
maybe forever. I don't know. I think that's what Tom is most upset about, actually. Not that he has to be Madsen's puppet. He's used to that. I think he's upset that when he got here, when he got to this point, if he got to this point in the previous seasons, he floated it himself, of course, to Shiv. Like, what if it's me? Like season 2, he talks about that with Shiv. Maybe even season 1. Like they talk about it very early, and it's always played as like a joke because Shiv's like, no, if it's going to be either of us, it'll be me. But when he floats it to his wife. He basically envisioned this being his complete bliss, right? He's gonna have the family, the money, the title. Like he wanted this under such different circumstances because he had to basically ask his wife to do this. The Matson promised Shiv this job. Not really, but she thought he did, and frankly, Tom thought he did, right? And um, and he realized at that moment that he had to basically ask his wife that his wife wasn't going to get the job, but he might. And he said, "All right." But Tom, for all of his faults, obviously didn't fell out of love with Shiv a bit, but he wanted, I think, to be happy and married. He wanted her to be wealthy and stuff. I think that he was just as much a gold digger as anyone else. But I do think he had hoped they would be happy, and obviously they're not.
And remember, also they had that talk right before, and basically it was a very important moment in this episode. And Shiv asked him, "Do you want a real relationship?" And he just says, "I don't know."
Right, which again, I think is a fair thing to say given their past. Frankly, he didn't know. It's possible though; he was open to it. He just wasn't sure. And I also think it's important the timing of that. He had not been offered this job. That was genuine. Shiv thought she was going to be the CEO, and she wanted to bring Tom. You know what I mean? Like she was thinking Tom the whole time, and maybe Tom was thinking Shiv the whole time too. I'm not actually even saying there isn't a genuine connection still potentially there. They're not going to explore it because the show is over, but they definitely left it open for that. But it's just so interesting that Shiv, when she thought she was going to be on top of the world, asked for Tom, and Tom, to his credit, ended up on top of the world, so to speak, and he did bring Shiv. So they have this weird relationship for sure, but I do think that Tom, again, if there's a villain of this season, I guess you would call it Tom and Matson. But I don't even know if there was a villain. I'll be honest with you. Like I said, to what is it? To quote Macbeth again, the villain's the hero. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are horrible people. When Macduff shows up with his army and clears them out, I mean, there's no guarantee it'll be better, of course, but it's not like people love the Macbeths. They were kind of shitty. And
Yeah,
so,
right.
like, Tom is the villain in that he beat, Tom and Matson are the villain in that they invaded Waystar and took out the Roys, but it's not like the Roys were good people. It's not like everything was better with the Roys. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's hard to say that they're a villain just for doing that, but they are the adversary of our main character. So I guess in that respect, by that definition, those two are the villain.
Did you see that TikToker who successfully predicted
Based on the
that?
WOM scams thing?
Yeah, on
Yeah,
his last name, that the only person to ever perform a unassisted triple play, and I guess you got it. I don't know if the writers have confirmed if that's true or not, or if they ever will. But man, she was spot on that one.
Well, I
That
don't know.
was a very out there last name.
Do we call it unassisted?
Well, essentially, no. You needed Greg's help, and you needed Greg to
Yeah.
to push all the things together. So I guess essentially not, but I don't know. And I guess we'll see how far in advance did the writers have thought about this. And also Shiv, I guess her name really means knife in some other language.
Oh, a shiv is like I mean, I'm sure maybe it's in the language too, but in like a
Right.
prison yard, if you sharpen something
Mm-hmm.
to use as a knife, even though it's not a knife. So basically, a knife that's not a knife, something you've sharpened to make a knife, is often called a shiv.
Right.
Yeah, again, for
Oh, okay.
backstabbing. So
I didn't know
backstabber,
that.
Shiv. She ended up backstabbing Kendall, which doesn't
So
mean anything. But
and also just reading the things I have, I guess
the
they didn't
Romulus,
know what.
just think, I wonder if, because Romulus is a very unique name too, because Roman's name is Romulus.
I actually
Uh,
didn't know that this whole time. That's
oh,
funny.
that's one of the funniest lines of like the first season when they're trying to vote the Logan out the
Oh,
very first time, and he lays it, he
yeah,
goes,
it's
"You
been a
better
while
be
since I saw
sniffing
first
your
season.
armpit, Romulus." He just puts his hand down.
um, so I guess they didn't know until the actual table read of the last episode that this was going to be the series finale. So again, I'm sure, especially with this as the once the news cycle starts up again, tomorrow after the holiday weekend, we'll see them comment how far it advanced. But you gotta give credit to her. She hit that right on the nose. And
Oh, absolutely.
also with I sent you this tweet from J694040049. Tom Wambsgans, after avoiding prison, flipping the power dynamic in his marriage with Shiv, being in Madsen's good graces, defeating Kendall to run Raystar Royco, and still managing to keep Greg subversive to him. My man won in every way possible.
Yeah, again, he definitely won. That I mean, there's no way to put it, but did he? Like I said, he didn't look happy, did he?
No,
The
no,
happiest,
definitely not. And
the happiest he looked, the two moments where he looked like he might have been happy, one of them was clearly fake, and that's when he walked into the room for the pictures and brought the bubbly and all that stuff out. And the other one was when he was telling Greg that you effed it. That was
so when
genuinely the
Greg
happiest.
and yeah, and this was when
Right
they're
before he
together
told Greg, "I got
right
you."
after the interview, and then Greg puts his translator app in Swedish.
Oh, no, no,
Eh,
no! At the end of the very end of the episode, when
Oh yeah,
they're
wait, sorry,
talking,
sorry, you're
yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
and he puts
the sticker on his
the
head from
sticker
the
on him.
collection, yeah.
Now,
Um,
talking about that scene and also that fight in the bathroom, I've seen a
oh,
lot of fights, so that's
so
what
going back to the actual sticker scene.
yeah, what
Okay.
we're talking about here, which I love that fight. It was just so, if these two actually fought, this is what would happen.
Yeah.
Um, where's I going with this? So we have that moment there with the Greg and Tom dynamic.
Hmm.
Did you think he was really going to let him out to drive? But just how Matthew McFadden delivered that line, he said, you're going to get a pay cut, but I got you.
Yeah. And I don't even know how big the pay cut will be actually, but because I
That's
think
kind of crazy. So $200,000 as
for
an
an assistant, yeah.
assistant. Oh
But I
my
think,
god.
in fairness, I think that I mean he said that, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. We'll never know. But I think, I mean, he likes being in charge of Greg. He likes having Greg to lord around, so he will keep Greg to do that. But yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen with Greg because again, right at the end when they're talking about what's going to happen, he goes, Jerry's going to stay. Obviously, Carl and Frank are gone, and then he goes, "What about me?" Essentially, and he goes, "You effed it. You
And that's
played
when
your
he was
hand and
happy,
you
as you
effed
said.
it." And that was when that was the happiest he looked, genuinely, when he was telling this guy who he'd basically been, controlling for 2 years now, that you screwed up because you went against me. But I still got you. Like when he had, basically when he owned Greg, he was like, that was the happiest moment of his entire coronation to CEO. But to go back to the actual bathroom scene and then to the actual like going to Logan's apartment and picking things they want to keep. Um, I thought that scene was really good. Obviously, the bathroom fight was good, but I think that watching the home video, having the kids
Mm-hmm.
watch it, this was such an upbeat episode for so long.
Yeah, you thought at
I
one
was
point we're
like,
gonna get a wholesome ending.
yeah, they almost had me with the wholesome ending, especially at this point after everything else working out, and we saw that video of Logan happy, legitimately happy with his friends and all that. But
Yeah.
one thing I didn't like was they're talking about the whole situation with the president-elect, and they basically brought up like, yeah, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is not necessarily certifying the election. They
Mm-hmm.
eventually said, essentially, they said that they said,
Right. They're
and
gonna
so,
recount it, so
but yeah, so Mencken might lose, and therefore he won't be the ambassador to Slovenia. He'll be nothing. And he won't move to Slovenia. He will live in the apartment with Willa, who was going to stay in the apartment originally as a playwright. And they played that a bit for like laughs and a bit for like, well, Willa was clearly going to go cheat on Connor.
multiple
Um,
times.
right. Because they were living apart. They were doing the long distance thing. And I, I thought they did a lot of work at the beginning of this season, making that relationship look whole in a way that I thought was compelling, and they
Funny
kind
you
of
say that. I have words on
yeah,
that too. You were saying.
and they kind of undid that for a cheap joke in a scene that didn't need it. Like Willa didn't need to say anything, and I get that. Again, Connor is the comic relief, and so they wanted to throw one last joke in there. But like, I thought they did a lot to almost again differentiate Connor from the rest of the Roys, in that yeah, he's got this weird life and he's got this weird like semi-prostitute wife, but they gotta have each other's back. That they like
Mm-hmm.
being around, and throughout the series they've kind of built that up. And then again at his wedding, Willa's there's still a little bit with her parents, like he's really rich. You could see that the money was still important, but she kind of had him,
Like
and
legitimately liked him, or like had
not
him in the palm of
legitimately
his
like
hand.
no, not like legitimately liked him necessarily, but like she had his back as his
Yeah,
partner.
and like see,
If not love, something adjacent to it. It felt like to me anyway. Maybe that wasn't what they were going for, and I read too much into it as a hopeless, hope not hopeless. I'm married, but as a romantic, someone who's into hopeless romanticism. So
yeah,
maybe that's just on me, and I just read it wrong. But I felt like they'd really done a nice job of that relationship, and then they kind of again, it wasn't irreparable damage. It wasn't, it was a throwaway joke. But for a throwaway joke, they kind of are like, oh, she's still cheating on Connor.
yeah.
Like it just felt
We're
weird.
doing this long distance. That's one
Yeah,
thing you talk about too, right? Obviously, in this, it was with their relationship. It's a perfect example of Connor's her sugar daddy in this
absolutely. Yeah.
world. And one of my, I hope, if I'll make it myself, if not, I'll make it myself. If not, then hearing the story, like learning about like those type of what's the official term, the mutually beneficial relationships, sugar
Sure. Right.
daddies, people who are, why we see an 85-year-old dating a 28-year-old because he's extremely rich.
Hmm.
And I've never seen anyone like tackle that subject and like actually interviewing these people. Like, you actually love this person, or do you love them back? And I thought in this, even though albeit a fictional take on it, maybe
Yeah.
you were saying, like maybe there are people who actually genuinely have feelings and love for each other. They just so happen to have the money.
Yeah.
And as
Well,
you
again,
say
not just so
here,
happened. I think the money was the inciting, and
oh yeah,
the
right,
money's the reason they're
yeah,
together
and
for
that's a
sure.
joke too,
But they're like they grew like a fondness for each other.
right,
In addition to the money being, of course, being the main benefit. I thought, but they kind of played that maybe that wasn't the case, and I thought that was weird that they did that.
right, and I guess they were about to show like maybe this does work here, but then that could be your joke again, and why we have to have this documentary or book about these kind of relationships. Yeah, she was just gold digging this whole time.
Could be right. And so I thought that was a weird
Poor
joke to
Connor,
make.
poor
Right.
Connor,
And I
man.
mean, I guess uh, all the Roys had to fall, right? And he's a Roy. But
Mm-hmm.
I thought the same thing that Shiv did. When Kendall said I'm the oldest. Mike Connor was in 2 scenes ago.
Yeah,
um,
right.
and Connor brought that up last season. I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest. I need to be taken care of. I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
I do think that that scene minus the one joke, which it was fine. It wasn't that big a deal. I thought that was interesting. Again, watching them all see their dad as like a final goodbye to Logan, and I wonder how that played into her, meaning Shiv's, final decision. I
And
wonder if
also that
seeing
also showed they did have, despite everything, wholesome family moments, even the
well,
most
they
dysfunctional,
weren't
fucked up
there.
families.
I'm saying they weren't even there. It was just Connor, Logan, and Logan's employees. It was just
Yeah,
like their bosses, and I wonder if she, meaning Shiv, saw that because I like to believe that Shiv also wanted out. I know she's with Tom, and people are like, she's not really out. She is out. I'm telling you, they could not have made it any more clear. Shiv is not in charge. She's got Tom
yeah.
in charge of her, who's got Madison in charge of him. Shiv has absolutely no say in anything that's going to happen. She, again, may continue to be the acceptable face of Waystar Royco because she's the Roy, so she's got the last name. She's the expecting mother. She's got the right politics, so she'll probably be like again the mainstream face for her husband and Manson's operation.
Right.
But that's it. She's a mascot
And it's
for
caused definitely the
Waystar.
most debate I've seen so far about Shiv
Yeah,
and her choices there. And also,
yeah.
one, I wonder if this made her decision too. If you remember before the vote, when Kendall was literally in Logan's chair, that's going to be your desk. For a second, they thought, okay, this is what I'm going to see. And ultimately, did she feel that he is a fuck up, and she knows deep down, even despite all the family love, the unconditional love, which clearly is all BS with the Roys, um, that yeah, he's not the right one, or was it an
So yeah,
ego
I'm
decision?
of two minds. I think there's
And we're gonna have a lot of deep YouTube videos made by creators forever on
oh
this.
sure. I do wonder. Yeah, it could be that she saw that he wasn't right for it. Obviously, I think she didn't necessarily think he was right for it, but I'm kind of of two minds. I think their option one is that she didn't want any of them to have it. I don't think she wanted any of them to have it. It's either because if it was if I can't have it, no one can, which would be very infantile. But we've watched them for 4 seasons now. That's totally not out of the possibility, right? Or because again, and they saw that clip. I mean, Logan had dinner with his C-suite, his COO, his CFO, and Jerry, his head general counsel. That was who he was at his family dinner with, and Connor was there too. Logan lost everything too on the way out. He had barely gotten Roman back. Kendall and Shiv were long gone. He had Greg and Tom, but they were just doing it because they thought that with the actual kids gone, they had a shot at something real.
Right.
Logan lost everything on his way out too, and I wonder if watching that, all of them felt something, and Shiv in particular felt like, what is this that we're fighting for? I almost feel like at the end, for me anyway, and again, I think I'm reading into this. I don't think this is 100% the way they wanted it portrayed, but I think they gave us a little hints that you could take it this way. Is this felt like a kingdom of sand to me at the end, and I think that
What do you mean by
everyone,
that?
a kingdom of sand, so like it crumbles in your hands.
Yeah.
Like I know that Roman said we're bullshit, and I think he meant that to mean like kind of the nepo baby thing, like that we grew up in a fantasy. But I think that the whole Waystar was meant to at least a little bit look like a kingdom of sand, to look like bullshit. And I think I'm taking it that everyone but Kendall at the end, Kendall saw it last. I'm taking it as Roman saw it first, Shiv next, basically in order of who people thought could be in charge. Roman was the dark horse. He was always the dark horse. So he was the first one to realize this is all bullshit. Shiv was, the next most likely, but she was never dad's favorite to take over. And so she's the next one to learn it was all bullshit. Kendall needed to lose it to realize at the very end that I'm bullshit. This is bullshit. This means nothing. What I mean? Like this is all like, this power that we've accumulated through this company. It's all make believe. It's nothing. Logan was the power at Royce, at Waystar Royco, and Matson will be the power of the new company. Like Matson is powerful in the same way Logan is. He's wealthy, enigmatic, ruthless, the whole 9 yards. But
a killer, if you will.
Yeah, killer. And so I think that I wonder if that last clip of Logan alone singing with his employees as a moment of merriment, obviously gave some levity, gave the kids some fondness kind of view of their father, whom they had been trying to take out for years, but also kind of jogged them all to this conclusion at some point. They all got there later than others, that he wasn't happy. The world didn't revolve around, like, you know what I mean? Like his kingdom was
it's
nothing.
like, if you've seen Godfather 2 by any chance,
I have, yes.
in the final scene there where we have our Al Pacino, Michael Corleone is originally with family at the table, despite all the messed up things he'd done and literally killed siblings and stuff. And then he's alone at the table once again.
Yeah.
They have that screenshot there. Maybe it does support your theory on that one too.
Yeah. Something I noticed, again, I don't know if that's exactly what they wanted, because that does lower the stakes a little bit. And I don't think the stakes were meant to be lowered very much. But I do think that there's some of that, of the melancholy. Yes, it was a sweet, tender moment of happiness they never got to see from their dad, but it also really, they weren't there at the end, and it displayed that on full display, that this company destroyed their family, whether they like it or not. This company ruined the Roys.
Can I say one thing? Essentially, the last happy moment of the show. I see a lot of people say this is where it should have ended. Where we do see the voting pact that lasted only a few hours get made by the Roy kids, and we see them having, you're gonna drink your, drink
feast
everything
fit for a king.
Feast fit for a king, and they put just everything possible in there, and they make fun of the stepdad licking his expensive cheese and stuff. Did you get anything from that moment? Did you also feel like, wow, this is a happy moment and this is how it's gonna end? Even though there was like a solid half an hour still left, this is gonna go wrong. And you don't, definitely when you're lost in the moment, and like, this is why if you're watching it in a theater, there's no time limit. Oh, well, maybe this is going to be a happy ending after all. And despite it literally not making any sense, and I might give up my values for it, but I'm just a sucker for a happy ending.
That was the Netflix ending right there.
Yeah.
Or like the CW or whatever. Like, yeah, that was the happy ending. I will say that's not the moment that got me. I thought this ending. I was like, okay, well, this is the Netflix moment. This is where it would end if it was, meant for a different audience. But right after that scene, when they all get off the plane, and this was really well done by the creative team too. When they arrive at the house,
In Barbados.
doesn't it,
Just 1 second. Can you just repeat that one more time, Ryan?
whole time he's
Can you just repeat that one more time? You went in and out. So it
yeah,
looks like
sure.
we're having you back.
In
So you were
Barbados,
saying?
yeah. Are we good?
Yep, yep. In Barbados.
Okay. Um, in Barbados, yep. He's wearing shorts. He's wearing a t-shirt the whole time, right? And then right after that scene, right after they say, Kendall, you're in charge, they give it to him, they give him the feast, they dump it on his head. They all get off the plane and they show Roman Lance, and he's back in the power suit, right? He's back in the vest and the thing he wore all season when he was the CEO. And now you see all three Roys at their peak power, right? They're all dressed to kill. They're all dressed to take over the company. And that was the moment that got me. At that point, I was like, maybe they're gonna find a way to do this. Maybe Ken is actually going to take it. I was still super skeptical, but when I saw that, I was like, they got the team back together at full power. I was like, maybe, just maybe, this will be the first and only time the Roys work together.
And that's why you got 4 whole seasons out of it, because from the start, if they worked together,
Yeah,
this
it
would
could
have
have.
literally never happened. But we needed 4 seasons of TV.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about, I want to hit on Kendall, like one major conversation with him one more time with Kendall.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw at the very beginning his first shot with those headphones, eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
That okay, this is the moment we want Kendall. It's hard to say Kendall was an anti-hero. I mean, he was in the definition of the world. You're cheering for somebody who does bad things ultimately.
Right.
And yeah, I guess that's just some of the eerie things that didn't make any sense. And then when it came down to the end, and him first like ripping Roman's him ripping
Face.
Roman's face and his
Yeah.
stitches, that was definitely an uncomfortable scene. It's so simple. And then we see, how much this is all he wants. He doesn't have anything in his life anymore, but this is the one of his company. I guess maybe he has Stewie, but probably no Stewie. He probably is like,
No.
loser.
Yeah, exactly. He's where the money is. Stewie's a money guy.
Team Kendall.
Yeah, when he thought Kendall had the votes.
He was very confident with that one. I like Stewie a lot. I think he'll be a good actor at like post Succession career. Anyways, so and then we see the moment that even though I wanted it like a Walter White and Tony Soprano character, like I want these guys to succeed, even though I know they're terrible people. But Kendall was just so unprofessional towards the end, and he's literally screaming and swearing down the hall and not having his composure whatsoever.
He
And
watched it. He was falling away. He knew it was gone.
yeah, and it's just like,
You don't need to be
yeah, I didn't
professional.
really
He's
feel
not
bad
CEO.
about I don't feel bad for him anymore. It never did. And despite and I really did think the guy had some morals. And I'm sure I'll rewatch it. When I see a show, I usually just put random episodes when I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were times I really felt for Kendall, and after seeing just how bad he was to his siblings at the end, and I get it, we have sibling rivalry is definitely a thing, but he was just really, really nasty. And then,
He was fighting for his life from his
right,
perspective. To give the alternate perspective, again, he said out loud to his siblings, he was vulnerable enough to admit it. Like, this is me. This is my everything. I'm not made for anything else. I'm meant to do this or bust. And they were still saying no. Again, you can make the case that in Kendall's mind, he was literally fighting for his life because he doesn't believe he's made for anything else.
and now here's the big question too. It made him snap, and we texted a little bit on it, but I want to explain it
Yeah,
obviously at
yeah.
this moment. So you have Kendall talk about I am the oldest, and something is mentioned that, well, if Shiv goes in, and maybe this helped her with her decision, that you will not have the official bloodline. She is at least fully bloodline. And Roman mentions his kids and basically implying, and I looked at all through the show, was this mentioned again? This was never mentioned about his kids, even though they blatantly didn't look like him.
But they look like his
Yeah,
ex-wife.
true. But it basically comes out that the two kids aren't his, that they are adopted or via surrogate, which is
Yeah.
also a very another rich thing, dude. These rich people usually just
Well,
get surrogate mothers and
so
stuff.
not surrogate. So he said,
In
and to be clear,
in Vipro, what's the
well, no.
official?
So I mean, what I
Yeah, I'll
heard,
let
and
you.
we'll have to
I'll
rewatch
let
the
you
scene.
say that.
First, I think it's important that Roman was not necessarily saying this. He said that Logan said this, which made it hurt more.
Called them randos.
Yeah, he said that Logan had been saying these things. So, his father had been saying these things about his children. And one was adopted, and I heard that, one's from like Malaysia or whatever they said.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other, she said the other one's from Rava and the file guy, right? That sounded to me like infidelity. Like
Right.
Rava got pregnant sleeping with some random guy who worked at the company. And that's when, frankly, that's when Kendall attacked Roman.
That was the hardest head squeeze I've ever seen.
Yeah, was trying to rip his stitches open. But and even Shiv was like, Roman, no. So yeah, it's weird that they never mentioned the adopted thing before, but it is a very, again, rich person thing to do. But the other one,
Mm-hmm.
that I believe the son is Rava's, but not Ken's.
Yeah.
I don't think that necessarily, to me, that doesn't necessarily confirm that. Now, a lot of people will take it as gospel because it's in the last scene of a TV show that's going off
Exactly
the air.
right.
But I will say, like there are families that are mixed or have, like members of it that don't have follow the traditional like cis normative
Right.
lifestyle, right? And
A
there's just
legitimate bloodline, not a WWE one.
no, yeah, but there's families that have a traditional relationships and a traditional connections within them, and a lot of like old school folks just kind of don't get it. And I'm not going to get into any specifics, but
Mm-hmm.
we could if you and I offline want to talk about it. I'm not going to blow up anyone's spot, but like I could just say from like being around and talking to people that there's just kind of this old school kind of mentality. And so
Yeah,
I could
I know
totally
what you
see
mean.
a world where Ken had a son with Rava, totally normal, like for a married couple to do. And the son came out looking more like Rava than Ken. And the racist old man who runs, ATN didn't love the fact that the kid didn't look white. I
Yeah.
could very easily see that being, and
Oh
I could
yeah.
very easily hear, that person in my mind's eye saying like, clearly she slept around with somebody else. Clearly she slept with the janitor, or she clearly slept with, a friend or the personal trainer, or whatever, a guy at the grocery store. Like I could see the old timer making jump, saying that. Whether they even believe it or not is irrelevant. But maybe believe it. I think because Roman said it, I think there had to be some, validity to Logan's belief in that at least. But I don't
That was a
necessarily know.
legit shocker.
Yeah, I don't know if that necessarily proves that to be true, but it does prove that, Logan was like, Ken was like, he promised it to me at 7
Yeah,
years old.
he never
It's
really he
always
never
me,
felt
always
it.
me. He always kept saying, Logan wanted me. That shows that Logan behind Ken's back said all kinds of nasty shit. If nothing else, even if that's totally untrue, it shows that Logan didn't care if it was Ken. He didn't necessarily like Ken. He loved Ken as he loves all of his kids in a very strange Roy way, but he didn't necessarily like Ken or have nice things to say about Ken or see Ken as a worthy successor if he was saying those things, whether he believed them or not. So I think that was more, to me, that was more what I got from that, is that Logan didn't care that it was Ken. He did he underline? Did he cross out? None of that matters. But he could have underlined Ken's name. He didn't care if it was Ken. He needed to put a name on a piece of paper because that was required by law. And so that's what he did. And I think that was proof of that to me, more so than proof of infidelity or, whatever. It was proof of like Logan didn't care about Kendall at all.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond how he cared about all of his kids, which was like bare minimum sort of like base instinct. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like he didn't believe Ken needed to be the one. He didn't believe any of them needed to be the one. but Ken lived his whole life thinking his father
He
deep
said,
down
"You
would
told me
be
when
it.
I was 7 years old."
Yeah, which is also crazy, right? But
He's unhinged. You know, the big question and theory you put out there, and that has been discussed about, would Kendall take his own life in the show? And there was the two instances where you thought that could happen. When he was going in the elevator, I thought you saw he was going down. Thought for a second, if he went up, then he just shoot,
yeah. Well,
go out in that kind of glory.
and so I've
Um,
rewatched. Sorry, I've rewatched a lot of the series with Melissa.
mhm,
Again, I'm watching current by myself and back with Melissa,
yeah,
and there is a moment in the shooting episode, season 2, I think, or 3. What season two with the lockdown when there's
yeah.
the shooter, the guy who kills himself at ATN,
Mhm.
um, and he's on the roof the whole time, and he's just looking down. And it's very heavily implied that a massively depressed Kendall is essentially just, someone just killed themselves downstairs, and
Mhm.
he's basically just thinking about it. And then there's a little bit later in season 3, a little early in season 3, I believe, maybe season 2 still actually. No, season 3, where he, gets drunk, passes out in the pool, and almost dies.
Right.
So Kendall, to be clear, it wasn't just thrown out and then Kendall dies,
Oh yeah,
like
no, no,
because it
no,
makes
no.
you
I was
realize.
just saying
Kendall
what
has had
was
some
looking at. Of
suicidal
course,
tendencies throughout the series,
for
and
sure. And
so
then the very last scene, he goes
to the
looking at
water,
the scene. I thought he would go like
which is
swim
the
out to
other thing
sea.
he almost died in. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he
water
looked at
has been a theme with him. He's been around
yeah,
water a lot to close his episodes.
yeah.
Water is a symbol for sure. And then I just saw that guy in the coat. I thought, is he gonna, you know, take him out
That
like
was
that?
his driver. That was
Right.
Logan's driver and his driver. I don't think he would. Yeah, but
Which would be dark. But I think I like the ambiguous. I'm let me say I'm happy that he didn't do that.
I am too.
And and
I am too. I know
that'd
it
be really
predicted it, but I am too.
depressing.
Yeah.
Um, and he is gonna get billions of dollars. Doesn't doesn't Kendall seem like the type he could just make his own company? Why don't you buy a sports team? Like literally,
Well,
that would be a
I
perfect
think
thing to
he's
do.
saying, but he admitted that he can't. He can't do that profitably. He can't make his own company profitably. He's,
Because of him personally, like he wouldn't know what to do.
yeah, he's not ready.
Oh, that sucks.
He can do Waystar. He knows
That's the worst
Waystar.
thing, probably the easiest investment you could do with a sports team. You literally just have to hire the right people, or
Right.
just listen to people to tell you to hire the right people. But
And he may very well do that, by the way. I'm not saying, again, we'll never know.
yeah,
But what I'm
right.
saying is this moment will be like the moment, this moment that we're leaving him in is him acknowledging that he'll never build anything like he could have had. He's not equipped for it. He's not skilled enough. He can't do what Logan did, in his speech. And
He could
that
just be.
those eulogies said a lot, in my opinion, about this episode. And he said, "I hope I have it in me," meaning his father. And we saw he embodied the worst traits of his father in this episode. But at the end of the day, he realized he doesn't. That
People were saying that
force.
he made that turn towards the end of the penultimate
Well,
episode.
yeah, that was but he realized, I think, he didn't have that force of nature that Logan had at the very end, and that's why he was sitting in the calm. I also think Shiv pointed out, and I saw this on Reddit too, and I was really glad someone called it out there. Um, her speech was he couldn't fit, meaning Logan couldn't fit a whole woman in his head, and I mean, I think that had a lot of meaning in that episode because that was very the women of Roy centric, that ending of that episode. But I do think that also people looking for why Shiv did it are kind of doing the same thing Logan would have done. It wasn't, I don't believe, again, I don't believe it was just one thing. I think she was jealous because she felt she deserved it. I think she was scared for what this company had done to her family after seeing that tape of Logan and seeing the way Kendall flew off the edges, the way Roman was basically cowering when he walked into that building. So I think there was fear too. I think that there was, like, again, there's so many different little reasons why she did it. It wasn't just revenge. It wasn't just to save Kendall from himself. It wasn't just to give Tom the leg up. It was everything and nothing all at the same time. She's a whole woman. She has
Yeah.
her own, like, in a split second decision she had to make. And I think that that's an important thing to recognize for all these characters, not just her. They're not archetypes. They're not Shakespeare. That's what makes us different than Shakespeare. Shakespeare, everybody's an archetype. Everyone plays a very simple, easy to grasp character. None of these people are simple. None of them are an
All
archetype. They're all
complex.
whole. They're not all whole women because some are men, but they're all whole people. They're both good and bad. They have the capacity for hate and the capacity for love and affection. And I think that all of those things were probably going through Shiv's head when she voted no. A hate
And
for the company, a hate for Kendall, a love for her company, a love for her family, a fear. Like there's probably so many different things that ran into her head, and she just had to go with what came out.
I wonder if Shiv's based on, again, I've heard this in a pocket, so I did no research on this at all. But I guess there's a Murdoch who is one of his daughters who just is against everything he does, is against Fox News and all of that. And I just wonder if she's based off of him. Again, I have no research. I don't know.
Perhaps in some capacity. The other two, the Roman and Kendall, are at least loosely based off of the two Murdochs that are in charge,
Yeah.
that are
And
not Rupert.
for
His two kids, like Leland and whatever. I don't know their names, but there's two of them. There's two boys that are kind of in charge.
I see. Yeah, and we hit everything we need with Roman pretty much, that he's just will be that playboy. Cousin Greg, again, just living off pretty much I think everybody's favorite character. Again, on a brand scale, because he's just a happy-go-lucky guy.
I don't know about happy-go-lucky,
but he's just a funny.
He's
dude.
funny, yes, he's funny.
Pretty much there with the other execs that, well, I guess they just wanted to get rich too. So extremely rich. Guy who looks like Aaron Sorkin, especially, so funny.
Carl, the CFO.
Yeah.
What
was I gonna say there? So at the end of this show and how this all ends up becoming something, and one thing that is mentioned, this show has so many options to be legitimate spinoffs, not like the Game of Thrones when they want to try to throw down our throats.
Well, House of Dragons is very good.
True, but do we need House of Dragon?
You don't need anything, but House of Dragons is
fair
very
enough.
Good. I don't think House of Dragons, but the other one, the Adventures one that they want to do, I don't think we need that.
But yeah, so we have Succession. There's so many options you could do for Succession spinoffs, but Jesse Armstrong, at least for now, what we've learned, everyone has a price. No spinoffs, no continuations, and and the head of HBO actually said we're never going to do any more reboots on our show, despite I guess she said the word reboot, so not a continuation, so I guess semantic wise. But anyways, but the thing is, Jesse Armstrong though said, no, we're done after this. But you were saying?
I think that this, again, to give it more Shakespeare parallels, I think if they want to make any further media out of this, I think it needs to be a stage production. And you can't do the whole deal. I get you can't do the whole deal, but you can condense some of the main events and bring them closer to the end.
Yeah, you could do that within this 2-year period.
Yeah, you can't follow the whole thing, but I think you can take some of the main events from the first 3 seasons and condense them into 2-act structure, and you can take this 4th season and make it a 3rd act, almost untouched, frankly. And I think you can have I think this would do very well on a stage. And I think part of that is because everybody in this is a stage actor. Like everybody in this,
true, all New York stage actors.
It's all all New York stage or British European stage actors. Yeah, and so I think that would be an incredible thing that if they really wanted to make more media. I don't know if they need to, and then you have the ability, after, if you make it a stage show, you can do these excellent casts of these legendary actors taking their turn. Like Logan Roy can be King Lear.
Logan Roy, the prequel series, Better Call.
Logan. not a prequel. I'm saying
you have to do Better Call.
When you do Shakespeare, when you do Shakespeare though, you have Othello, right, is a very iconic Shakespeare character, or the play about Caesar, like Caesar. You have all these big names playing Caesar or Othello. I think you could see an eventuality, if they wanted to do this, where big names in West End or in Broadway would want to take their turn as Logan Roy. Like a Logan Roy,
they could even do just table reads themselves.
Yeah, it feels like if they could condense it into a full product that isn't 4 seasons long of television, then I could see like Logan being one of those characters that enters into like the public consciousness. All of them, of course, they're all great characters, but Logan in
Starring
particular.
Ted DiBiase as Logan Roy.
Oh, a good actor, hopefully a good actor. But but yeah, again, like same with like Death of a Salesman. Like when an actor plays Willie Loman on Broadway, that means something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Or
Rite of passage there.
when Aaron Sorkin did To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway,
Yeah.
you know, and when they did that, it meant something. I think that when people play Logan Roy, it could mean something the way playing Atticus Finch does, or playing Othello, or Caesar, or King Lear does. And so, if they really wanted to continue, and I don't think they need to, I think they could just leave it as is. I think that would be the best way to go about it. It's trying to make it into one product that can be done over and over again with different casts. So other very talented actors have a chance to play in this world and in these roles.
It'd be a lot of fun. You want to know one role I see now? Matthew McFadden.
Faden, I believe is how
Or
you pronounce it.
McFadden. Fellow
Could
Matt.
be wrong, but yeah.
This is what you have to do with Matthew McFadden. They're about to do a new era of James Bond films. Going to hire a new James Bond. He should play one of the villains of Bond. That's all I'm going to say there. I think he'd be a great Bond villain.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to be Bond.
Yeah,
but I think they're going with the guy from Kick-Ass, as I mentioned to you.
Is he British?
1 second, everybody. I know you wanted to hear who the next James Bond is from this podcast. It's going
Aaron Tyler. What's his name?
Yeah, Aaron Taylor Johnson is the favorite, and he is British at 32 years old.
Didn't know he was British. So,
and he's also Maxoff in Age of Ultron.
Yeah, he's in the Marvel franchise. They killed his character off though. Spoiler alert. So,
anyways, how about Sam Taylor Johnson versus Matthew McFadden, the next Bond era, 2026? I think that'd be cool. Now, last question here before we sign off, Ryan.
Yep.
How do you rank this show? Are you with these people, recency bias aside, if you can make that this Succession is one of the greatest television shows of all time? Which HBO's best show of the year always gets that distinction, but does Succession really earn that?
Well, I mean, like you said, HBO gets that distinction every year from fans when it ends one of its premium series. And there's a reason for it. Like I said, I can name off the top of my head a bunch of HBO shows that could be the greatest of all time. Even Game of Thrones is in that conversation, despite the backlash to the ending, which I think I'll be curious to see what that backlash looks like in 5 years. It wasn't a good ending, but I don't know if it was, I don't know if it was exactly what people made it out to be. That final season, this was better than that though. To be clear.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Like I've watched a lot of these like premium shows again from HBO and other places, but mostly HBO, and they all have their different, claims. They all have their ups and their downs. This one to me felt like it had the least amount of downs. I can't really name too much that I didn't like about this show. I will say, I think that obviously a lot of people are into it. I mentioned on the preview that a lot of people just got into it, which is interesting to me. Probably because it was ending. This is a show about talking, about doing things.
Very, very pure acting,
which is great. But I could see that being a very difficult sell for some audiences. Whereas like spitballing The Sopranos, they do a lot of talking about doing stuff, a lot of great acting. They'll also whack a guy.
There are guns being shot.
Right. There's some sort of drama
and like action. There's like more like more sex scenes. I'm not saying that anything. It's just like obviously the sex scenes don't make a show, but it has all types of actions of the human condition in the mafia.
And so I think because another HBO show I really like is 6 Feet Under, which also has very little action.
Yeah.
A lot of talking. Now they jump like fantasy and stuff, which I think gives it more of an action-y feel sometimes. But again, that show, for as good as it is, it ended better than almost all of HBO's endings. It's
regarded as one of the best finales in their own right.
It just gets kind of ignored because I think it doesn't have that wider appeal. Like other folks are not going to pick it up now.
There's lots of talking.
The Wire is another one. There's a lot to do, lots to see in The Wire. The setting is interesting. Obviously, the acting is good. The characters work is good. But there's also action. There's things happening.
Mhm.
And so I think that genuinely, if you were trying to be like, what's the best show? Everyone can agree what's the best show, which will never happen. It would be a show that has more of that,
Right.
which doesn't make it good or bad. Like I said, my favorite HBO series still is 6 Feet Under, which does not have a lot of action. So I'm not one of the people that I'm talking about. But if you're looking at everybody in like a collective, like what's the best show of all time, I do think it's probably an HBO show. We can narrow it down to that, I would guess. But also nothing on HBO is that funny. I mean,
Except Curb
Succession.
Your Enthusiasm.
Well, yeah, they have comedy, but that's not one of the best
Right.
shows. That's not in that conversation. And some people like comedy. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, The Good Place, not HBO. That's just straight up cable, and I believe. And that was a really good show, and it's a comedy,
A
but it made
bold
you
twist
feel,
too.
yeah, like that's an awesome show for if you love comedy. You could easily make, or The Office, another big one. You could make the case that those are the best show of all time. Like they're comedies, but for a comedy, they're freaking awesome, right? I'm actually not a big fan of The Office, but
Me neither.
I'm not an idiot, so I understand that the
I'm aware.
cultural
Yeah,
significance
exactly.
of The
For
Office
sure. For sure, its
cannot
influence
be
is
ignored.
huge.
Yeah,
But to me, it's overrated. But I
I
understand
agree,
why.
but you have to put it in the conversation because just how many people are so connected to it.
We're gonna do a pod
Yeah.
one day. Why The Office is overrated for the
It's not
sole
even
purpose of
overrated
engaging.
so much. It's just like, oh, okay, we'll
Anyway,
take that.
but the
Yeah.
title to get people riled up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll say now if you want to make it short out of this, The Office is fine, but it stops being funny.
After
First of
season
all,
4,
yeah, it stops being funny after like season 3 or 4.
especially when Steve Carell leaves.
I also don't think it's that rewatchable. It's incredibly quotable, which is something similar, I guess. Like they
Very
have a lot of
mean,
very
a lot
funny
memeable
lines.
too.
Yeah, but like the show just it kind of like Seinfeld. But anyway, like
Yeah, very
I just don't.
non-linear.
Yeah, I
They're
just
just
don't think it
there.
has like they've got the little arcs that you follow and branch out through each season. But like I just don't think it's that good a rewatch. And so when I hear people like I watched it 16 times this month, I'm like,
That's
how?
being lazy.
I'm like, why? Why? I don't. It's not good enough to warrant that. Like, there's it's very non-linear to me. But I'm sure someone will disagree, and go for it. Do your deal. Shoot your shot. Scream into the void. That's what I do. But
I'm just disappointed at the end. We didn't have Tom say, "Looks like I'm the new Succession," breaking the
I'm
fourth
the
wall instead.
I'm the Succession. Well, that was honestly having me thought he might because I said it was very not Game of Thrones, House of Cards UK, and
Yeah,
that's the signature point of both the American and the British House of Cards is the fourth wall break. And I was like kind of waiting for it when they were in the car. I was like, oh my god. I was like, is Tom going to look at the camera and say something dark and ominous about the state of media? It felt so much like House of Cards.
Last important point too. One thing that's commented on with the show, and especially how it depends how cynical you are to look at it this way, but seeing how pure American corporations and conglomerates just being taken over overseas, and I think like that's one thing that the Gojo plays a role in. It's just like, yeah, these major companies who essentially decide culture, soon they're not even going to be American owned themselves. And I think that's a commentary on that. And especially with the Swedish influence Gojo taking over the American media conglomerate. That's something I noticed. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think there's part of that, but I wonder how much we're supposed to feel bad about that. Because again, think about it.
True.
There's an analogous to this media in real life. Like, and people might hate us for saying this, and if you get your news from here, God bless you. God bless you. But this is clearly about Fox News and News Corp.
Yeah, definitely.
Clearly.
Yeah.
That is the basis of Waystar Royco. It's like they basically said, what if News Corp went on steroids? But I think it also frankly takes a shot at Disney, who bought a lot of Fox. For
sure.
By the way,
they just didn't want the news.
Yeah, so
essentially,
it's clearly taking a shot at those two companies in particular, and I think that though Disney is different. That's not necessarily, but Disney we can put aside. News Corp, I think there's a lot of people in this country who would love for a Swedish company to take over Fox News. I think there's people who
Spotify
would
take over.
Yeah, I think
they're
there
Swedish.
People who would, yeah, Swedish.
Is Spotify Swedish? Is it
I
Swedish or
think so.
Swiss? Yes.
Yeah, he's Swedish. Matsson's Swedish in the show, but I think there's people who would line up to sign the petition to have Fox News get bought out by a Ford company. I think there's people who don't believe that it. I won't get any further than that, but I think that that's true, and I think that you could ask those people why, and they'd probably give you a coherent argument as to why. I also think it's important to point out that Logan is not American.
Yeah.
He was Scottish, moved to Canada, then came to America. Rupert Murdoch, who is his direct comparison, is not American.
Yes, Australian.
He is Australian. So I think it's interesting that, yes, I think there's a point to that, but also there's a point that, a Scottish dude from Canada was creating right wing. He was a right wing tastemaker in the world of Succession for decades, and as in real life, a right wing newsman from Australia has been creating the right political spectrum, the conservative right political spectrum in the United States of America for years now. Only recently, frankly, did he lose that distinction to Americans. In like 2016 and beyond is when Americans started kind of creating the right side, the conservative right side, rather, of the political spectrum. Up until then, again, it was Fox News, which is owned by an Australian dude, is run by an Australian dude. So I think that there's a commentary on like the fact that yes, American companies are being bought out. There's also a commentary on the fact that our culture, and I think this is both positive and negative about our culture. Our culture is not ours, really. Like it's not America. Like, oh, the American people, like the American people are the people who live here, whatever that means. And American culture is the culture brought by the people who live and work here, whatever that means. And I think this show does a really good job of showing that by looking at all of the ways that American companies are foreign owned, or so I think that there's a lot of that too. I don't think it was an explicit warning about American companies are being bought out by overseas conglomerates. I think it was more just our culture, according to the people of Succession. I don't necessarily know if I disagree. Our culture is a bit empty, waiting to be filled by the people in it. The people in our culture are the people who make our culture. That is American culture. It belongs to the people who are here, who are creating culture, which means it's ever changing and kind of volatile. So that's kind of what I got from that. But
I think there's some good stuff there and some valid points. Well, some great stuff, Ryan.
yes.
Now let's look for the next show to really deep dive in there. It's definitely not The Idol.
No, it doesn't seem like it will be. Doesn't seem like it will be.
But I guess it's time to find our next show to really break down and have the cultural significance it does. Maybe Fear the Walking Dead. No.
Walking Dead is so past its sell-by date. It's insane.
Oh man, but we'll figure it out. But great stuff, Ryan. We'll see you tomorrow talking all things Night of Champions here on this channel. And yeah, great stuff as always.
Thanks. Talk to you tomorrow.
Goodbye, Succession. We barely knew you, but it was good.